Yes. So, good morning, good afternoon to viewers who might be watching this right now. I'm here with Joey Jacob and beautiful type 3, and we're going to take a journey through the agony and the ecstasy of the type 3 and look at a couple of labyrinthian sorts of tunnels that one might go through as a type 3. And so I'm Michael Naylor, and I'm calling from South Portland, Maine on a fall day. Summer has definitely vanished, so my heart grieves a little bit. And I've been doing YouTube interviews for about a year and a half now. Just had for myself the great pleasure of hearing people's stories, which is my favorite thing. So that said, just thank you for being here, Joey, and maybe just start with talking about how you learned about the Enneagram and all of that, or whatever really you feel inspired to speak to.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you, Michael. I'm just really pleased to be here. I'm really pleased to be sharing about, as my journey as a 3, and because I know your work is about inspiring, and so I feel passionate about what you're doing here with your work.
Yeah.
So my journey with the Enneagram, let's see. When did I begin my journey with the Enneagram? So I was introduced to the Enneagram by Russ Hudson, who happens to be my brother. So I was introduced to this, you remember, feels like a million years ago, but it was probably 40 years ago. I was introduced to it through his association with Don Riso, as he was beginning to unpack it and starting to learn it and starting to, and how he and Don kind of collaborated and did their thing. I really quickly, as Russ was sort of saying, these are the types. It just was radiantly clear. There was no hesitation. There was no part of me going, well, I might be this, I might be that, I might be the other thing. It was like, oh, I won't swear on your podcast. But so it was like, oh, so it was sort of just a graphic boom. This is my pattern. This is my Enneagram point. At the time I called it type. So, that's where it all began, long ago. So there was no part of me, and I've worked with this, the Enneagram for such a long time now. And it was really interesting how there was no elbow room to go, oh, well, maybe I'm a.
Yeah. That's I had the same experience when my grief teacher pointed me toward Don's book, Personality Types, and said, read the type 4. And it was just like, felt like somebody had, torn the skin off my face. And I was like, oh my God, how does this person know my interior? So for you, what was that like to sort of suddenly see that you're 0.3? I mean, how did your heart and soul respond to that?
That's interesting because, 4, very different organization, 3. So the sense of exposure, this sense of, so it was kind of interesting. It was sort of two-sided. One, it was this deep sense of vulnerability, of exposure, of, this, because that's what it is. That's really what it is. So it was, but for me, there was this sort of balance that was happening, because on one hand, it was very, very, very vulnerable, exposing. And on the other hand, it's like, oh, that's this thing, which was not visible before. It just wasn't visible, because the whole point is these are habits and patterns that are virtually running us, which are not visible. So it was both illuminating, terrifying, frightening, and so like in my face.
Yeah, I do. Well, so yeah, it's a shock.
Yeah, it is. That's the right way to put it. It's a shock.
Yeah, and if it's not a shock, then it's just interesting information in your head center, right?
Right.
But if
Right.
it pierces the veil, it's like, oh my God. And
Yep.
I remember, after having my interior mapped out by back then, it was just dawn. I thought, well, I have the map now. It should take me a couple weeks, and I'll be on my way.
Yeah.
Not quite, but so for you, sometimes type three is called the achiever.
Mhm.
Success oriented, pragmatic, can go from point A to point B in the shortest amount of time,
Mhm.
and energized to succeed and produce. And so how do you fit into that? Like, what's true for you? What did you notice when you first learned? And yeah, how would you define your experience as a three?
Yeah, that was a really, really, really painful unpacking
Mm,
because my organization at the time was absolutely dependent on the valuing of my mother, which I've now realized was also my father because they're very shared. And so the you know this whole organization around going from point A to point B in the shortest amount of time, I that's kind of part of my inherent nature now, which I just sort of is just one aspect, one what I call just a simple capacity that just happens. But at the time back then, I was, I would say that my interiority felt empty. My whole beingness was organized around being what my parents wanted me to be.
mm, mm,
And it was a very reality for me. It was a very shallow waters, you know.
yeah.
Um, women were supposed to be beautiful, women were supposed to get married and have children, and that you marry a rich man, and that's the end of the sentence.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that's what I did.
Well, so that sense of I've heard threes talk about that sense of the shock of feeling empty inside, and like nothing to grab on in there, and having had all of their attention sort of gravitating towards that external image, and whatever the formula was to maybe redeem mom and dad and their woundedness or whatever. And they've said, like, I've been with a couple type threes when they first saw this, and they're like really horrified, like, what do I do with this emptiness? So how did you begin to navigate that? Like, what was helpful for you?
Yeah. So in the very beginning, it was just this awareness of it, and that all of my energy was moving out,
Mhm.
and that it was like so the first thing that I did back 35, 40 years ago was find
Mhm.
a therapist
Yeah.
who I then was really just honest with the whole process. And I remember this example, which is so three-ish as I reflect back so compassionately. I was trying to explain to her what it feels like. And
Mm.
I'm just struggling, and I'm struggling to express the feeling of it. And she had this blue, do you remember those water bottles that were blue? They're
Mhm.
like, they were dark blue glass
Mhm.
water
Mhm.
bottles, whatever the brand that was. But it was sitting, and finally I grabbed the bottle and I'm holding it up in her face, and I'm going, see, do you see? What do you see? And she's like, this shiny blue bottle.
Ah.
And then I turned it on its side
Mhm.
and I said, see, it's
Mhm.
empty.
Yeah. 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 And so it seems like part of the work is, how do I first develop the capacity to be able to be with that
Yes.
and not fill it back up with my habits of personality, to rest in that, and to begin to just settle into, well, what's there. So, and that can be really hard, because it feels like I'm out in the desert without a map, like I got the emptiness. So how did so when you started working with therapy, I guess the other question that pops up is, sometimes we talk about the heart center types 2, 3, and 4, that sometimes the three is, has bypassed their heart a little more than the 2 and the 4. They all have their way of getting confused. But what was true for you? Did you have that sense initially, like, I can't feel my heart, or how did you experience that heart center?
No, it wasn't that I couldn't feel it. It was that it was so defended.
Okay.
So defended. And I even remember, because of after that, just years of body work and physical work, there was like this deep defendedness,
Yeah.
which, defense creates a wall.
Yeah.
So I've heard it said often about 3 as being sort of heart bypass, but my direct experience, and with the 3s that I've worked with over the years, is it's a deeply defended heart.
Yeah. Yeah. So then there's that whole journey of, how do I start peeling the layers away, which I know when I came into recovery from addiction 39 years ago, and I look at it today, there's like 100 layers I had to peel off one at a time before I could actually expose my heart. So, and therapy was a big part of it. So what's changed in your relationship with your heart today?
Oh God, that is, I just want to say night and day. So for me, therapy was sort of the first portal, the first step into being with, and for me too, once my Enneagram point was revealed to myself, it was like the gig was up. It was up. So then it's just been, and of course, let's say that was 35 years ago. It's been a 35-year journey to this moment in time sitting with you.
Yeah.
So, that then was group therapy, art therapy. And so that was just the beginning. But then I got through my brother again. I was in a Gurdjieff group for a while doing some work. And then I got into a Diamond Heart group. So I've been in a student of the Diamond Heart work for 20 years now. So it's just been an evolution. So the question of my heart now, it's it's the guiding center of my being.
Yeah, beautiful. And so I wonder if you could speak to this idea that and when we're moving in the direction of our health and openness and presence, that the journey is kind of like taking 4 steps forward and then 3 steps back. That there's a sort of always a moving forward and a little bit back and a moving forward. And of course, one of the jokes we have, I'm in Gurdjieff work, and so at the end of the weekend, we're all just so open and just filled with love. And the teacher will say, okay, if you can hold on to that through the first stoplight, you're doing really well. But just notice when all of a sudden you're back in your personality. So I wonder if you could say a little bit about what your experiences have been with that sort of opening and then closing, and just maybe some thoughts on that.
Yeah. So it's been just a continuum. I remember in the beginning, in terms of, let's use Diamond Heart primarily, because when in the therapy, it was really just strengthening something, just getting capacity built enough to start to really start to peel away these veils,
Yeah.
And I'm aware of how early on there would be sort of, you go on a deep, long retreat and you feel open, and then you have to drive home,
Yeah.
and the snapback would happen so fast.
Mm.
But what I would say is that, so in the beginning, there'd be a grasping for states, grasping to stay, grasping to be, maintain a certain equanimity or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And as the years have marched on, there is just such a relaxation of that.
Awesome. Yeah.
It's just, sometimes we snap back. Sometimes we can catch ourselves in the act.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just so much, it's just what happens now. And it's not a station that's permanent.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a moment.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
different.
Yes. Yeah, I can. That was certainly my experience, just sort of opening to this new spaciousness, and then snap.
Yeah.
And I go, oh no, I'll never feel that again. And then over time, I noticed that there was kind of an addiction towards those states, and so then all my ego working to try to recreate it, and then just the relaxation and no longer clinging.
Yeah.
And I think it came from a sense of confidence that things were unfolding, and I could trust what's going on. So that was a huge shift for me, because in the beginning it felt like, after a 6-day training, it felt like I would fall into an ice pit. Like I would go from this, glory, glory, hallelujah, to, oh my God, I'll be here the rest of my life. So that just took experience for me to notice back and forth. It's going to be okay. And so that said, it seems like one of the heart gifts of the three is that capacity to kind of read people and sense what they value and care about. And when I'm healthy, my heart can really support people. But when I'm caught in my patterns, threes will often say, I can so intuitively read people that I can become what they applaud in a heartbeat.
Yep.
There, and then I'll be saying the words. Like I had one friend say, it's amazing, but I can be with somebody and my need to be approved of, if it's strong, I'll start talking about their kids as if I know them. And my friend will go, oh yeah, gosh, have you met my kids? And said, no, I really haven't, right? But somehow he picks up intuitively on the impressions of the kids, and says it's just like such a magnet for him, or was, until he got healthier. But did you experience that sort of thing in your early threeness, or from time to time now, where under stress, that you can morph into the treasured being of who you're standing in front of?
I do recall that, but I'm organized. If and I'm assuming the instincts and the work with all the instincts and everything, I'm organized around, which has really been powerful. Again, talk about powerful work. Mm-hmm. So I was organized around being a sexual three. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was like chameleon-like in terms of what attracts, what catches the eye, what catches the attention, Yeah. It's all it's a very particular kind of a lens and focus of three, not so much the social three, which is, I was low social. That was my organization. So when I think about chameleon-likeness, and being able to sort of shape shift, that way, it was all organized in a very particular way. And man, it was habitual, addicting, automatic, autopilot, whoa, yes. So that's just how I oriented around it.
And so say a little bit about, I know for myself, is first I had to get a glimpse of the autopilot. It was, as fast as lightning in the beginning, and out the door and down the street, and part of me is going, come back, please. So, way in the back, there's this guy going, uh-oh, you're going to have to apologize again. So could you describe a little bit about, what it was like to start getting glimpses of these patterns, and, whether your inner critic jumped up, if you had a spiritual inner critic that said, oh, that's really bad, or, what has that been like for you?
Yeah, and of course had spiritual inner critic that was, very busily saying, pop, 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 pop. But so what it was like, getting a glimpse of it too. It's sort of like, for me, when I think about it from the beginning, so there was first just seeing my type pattern and recognizing the truth of it, and starting to see that moving here, that what was here, and then starting to take actions to cultivate some inner awareness, which was a deep process. But then there was further and further and further refinement, the understanding the instincts. Powerful work for me. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting too, how for long ago, recognizing how the instincts organize my type 3 in a certain way, and then watching that. Mm-hmm. Oh man. So Rio comes in, and I remember when I was taught this so long ago, Russ said at the time, and now my understanding is so much deeper about the instincts and the organization of the centers, and just all of the way that it, I always think of it as, it's like our point on the Enneagram is like a hose that's crimped, it's a crimped hose. Mm-hmm. And every time we start to penetrate, I started to penetrate these patterns, see more and more and more layers, more and more of how the instincts, and more of how the centers are organized, and all of it, the integration, disintegration, the movement, it starts to open the hose. And the journey is bumpy. It's like you were saying, it's been sometimes, and again, when I think about the passions and the of 3, and all of this shame that would arise if I'm not, what's interesting is when I would not be doing the habitual thing, mm-hmm. shame arise. Yeah. But then when I catch myself doing the habitual thing, mm-hmm. shame arise. It's like there was no relief for a while.
Yeah.
It was just a painful unpacking.
Yeah.
But what I would say, and it's funny, I was thinking when you were talking too, and I'm so in touch with it, is this courage that resides, mm-hmm. that is right there, moment to moment to moment, to keep just putting one foot in front of the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And even when you don't know where the hell you're going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Well, it's a profound blessing for sure to be able to be in contact with that. So, so could you say a little bit about, your experience of vanity, how you see that, and how you've worked with that through the course of your life?
Mm-hmm. So initially, vanity was superseded it was like the defense wall against the emptiness, mm-hmm. against the worthlessness.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this deep sense of, I am not valuable unless I am being what you need me to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the vanity just sort of rises up as a defense against
protect your heart.
Truth. Yeah, it's a protection. It's a wall of protection.
Yes.
defends the heart. And
Yeah.
then, it just reminds me of this movie that I watched with my granddaughter so many times, Moana, and there's this crab, this giant monster crab, and the crab, it's got all these things stuck in its shell, and it's constantly, adorning its shell,
Uh-huh.
just a kind of a metaphor for this defended heart. You just
Yeah,
keep, and vanity is really just a defense mechanism.
absolutely. Yeah. And so I think that's, to me, is really important because sometimes it gets kind of articulated as a personality flaw rather than a defense mechanism
Yeah.
to protect the heart that just forms when we're little ones as a way of compensating for that sense of I'm not valuable. And so it can come sort of packed on the exterior at like superiority, like
Yes.
I'm, if you were a little bit more like me, you wouldn't be so jealous, right? Or however that's carried.
Yep.
I have had an uncle who was a type 3 who lived in Hollywood, and whenever I'd go to see him, he would immediately start showing me all his awards. And we go, and before we've even checked in, and he was doing work with John Wayne and Dick Van Dyke, and he would, but it's like he had to pack all of that stuff in front of me before he could kind of relax and go, okay, I'm okay. I've showed you that I'm spectacular, even though in his heart of hearts he didn't feel that way. So, so I guess the challenge or the question I have is how would you help a 3 begin to not have his or her spiritual inner critic eviscerate them for vanity, and to begin to rest in it with a kind of compassion?
Well, I think that what you're saying is, as for point 3, it's all my organization around all the points is compassion.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So for point 3, as with all the other points, there's going to be automatic, habitual behaviors, patterns that as we start to unpack our type and unpack all of this, become loud. It gets louder before it starts to subside.
Yeah.
And to honestly, courageously know that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And again, just keep noticing. And when you notice that you're having in a grandiose state, you're puffed up, puffery, you're like, whoa, look at me. It's just the pattern.
Yep.
It's just the pattern.
Yeah.
And the only action that's required is to notice, settle, return to your chair, find your feet on the floor, just.
Yeah. And it's what, we always are teaching is this idea, if I can begin to be with the pattern without judgment,
Yes,
that you start taking some of the magnetic trance-like power away from it. It starts to soften and may not, it would become less identified with it, right?
exactly.
And taken by it. So and that's a work in progress. That only takes 20 or 25 years, but it's every little bit makes a huge difference. And I think that the thing that was so important for me to understand is that this wasn't a get rid of a pattern quick program. It was more of, it was like treating the pattern like a child who's been abandoned, and just kindly noticing, and then over time space opened up where I could be objective in the moment and in contact with my heart. So so practice
And what you say for me is because from my experience, that's what's true. These are childhood embedded patterns that we take ourselves to be, that just get embedded, that we're identified with. And if we can hold them with that kind of compassion, and that is a cultivation too, that takes time. And it takes time to tolerate the feelings of shame, to be able to tolerate, for the heart to be able to tolerate these feelings and not, and then see that, you know, I survived.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
survived.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the
That's
next time, and the next time, and the next time, and the next time.
yeah.
And something becomes stronger.
Yeah. 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 I hear you. It's quite a process,
It
and
is. Mhm.
quite a process. So I wonder if you could say a little bit about that other, the fixation of the
Mhm.
three. Sometimes we call it deceit. And what does that mean for you? And what's been your experience of that? I mean, what's the story that makes sense to you?
What I recognize now, it's like what we started with. So I can sort of go back to the beginning. The deceit, from my perspective for point 3, is that I am this thing. And I actually think I'm the thing. I actually believe that. And because there's so much energy that's moving out,
Mhm.
the deception is that that's me. I'm this thing. I'm this shiny whatever the hell we've constructed,
Mhm. Mhm.
whether it's work organized or whatever,
Mm.
social, whatever, however we organize our shiny. And so, that was one of the biggest things for me when I first felt that emptiness. Because the emptiness is like the illumination, really, of this deceit that I'm
Not that, yeah, not your
putting all this
personality.
energy into this construct that is not, in fact, what's true or real here,
Mm.
you know?
Mm.
And that it's just this big construct of habits and defenses.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and yeah. So it's interesting. In some ways, everybody has this in some form or another, right?
yep. Mhm.
And noticing that I believe that that's who I am, and
Yep.
somehow my energy being identified with it, and then how to uh, first observe, like, the machine is just runs. It doesn't need me at all. It just boom, off it goes. And how can I was thinking for myself, one thing that really helped me a lot certainly was meditation and sitting and sensing my body. Somehow it created an anchor of observation inside of me. I don't really know how it happened, but I began to sense and feel when the machine was starting to kind of go into action.
Mhm.
So I wonder, for you, what are some of the things that have helped you to, sort of get eyes to see it, and not be quite as hypnotized, or anything that comes to mind for you that has been really helpful?
Yes, graphically and similarly.
Hmm.
So, I for so long, sensing practice, body-centered practice,
Mm.
meditation,
Yeah.
um, inquiry, which is a body-centered practice.
Hmm.
Um, so all of those things that return to the sensation, because the sensation too opens up the sensation of the heart, which
Yeah.
allows for the mind to sort of tune and actually open and hear the language of the body and the heart.
Yeah.
So that, for the 3, the organization is think, do, think something,
Do
do
it.
it,
Hmm.
think, do. And when with practice, sitting, meditation, sensing, feeling my feet on the floor or the pressure of the chair, getting embodied, becoming here,
Hmm.
it flips the whole organization. So then the body center, belly, the body, the here-ness, kinesthetic sense, then feels the heart, then the mind.
Yeah.
It's like it flips who's in charge.
Yeah.
But again, so share the very similar practices and ongoingly for many, 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 many years.
Yeah. I think there's a beautiful description, and it's similar to in the Gurdjieff work. There's this idea that when I begin to sense my body, the field of my heart comes online, and then the head center joins. There's a way. One person explained it. There's like a magnetic thread that runs up and connects all three centers, and then opens one up to higher intelligence, higher emotional center. But I think for my practical sense of it, it's just like suddenly I could, with simplicity, begin to see the patterns. They weren't so obscured and running all over. There was just like this simple, oh, there it is. And so anything else you've done around, that's contributed you to deepening maybe your embodiment, your sense of your, I don't know, in my exposure with Diamond Heart, it's very similar to Gurdjieff work, and we were always working to develop not only sensation internally throughout our bodies, hands, arms, trunk, and practice sort of feeling the whole internal field of sensation. And I, we've often, one of the things that Gurdjieff talked a lot about was how critically important it is to learn how to deeply relax your body as an assistance to opening up that energy field. So, yoga, it's always been big, and, massage and things like that. But I just wondered what's been your experience, if there's been other things you've done that have supported the expansion of sensation.
Yes, great question. And yes, so the answer is a graphic yes. So many years ago now, I don't know how many years ago, 20 years ago, I don't know, 25 years ago, in conjunction with the other processes that I started to undergo, I started body work, but hands-on body work with a really gifted therapists who start, so because before I even had any awareness of embodiment or getting in this body, it almost had to be kind of pried open a little bit. It felt like so there were so I had just for quite a few years, some really good hands-on body work, which helped soften some of the defensive armoring posturing that held all of these centers in its grips and all of this identity. It was just so that was a big support for me doing those things, and helped to just start to soften the armoring. Because one of the things I think is point 3, and I don't know if it's true for the other points, but we're so identified with these constructs that they feel like armor, so starting to soften that through good hands-on body work was really, really helpful. And continue to, and for me now, one of the things is moving slowly. Moving slowly helps me not self-forget. Because as a 3, like you said at the beginning, and what is really comical for me now, it's just so comical. So it's like sometimes if something's got to get done and something's got to get quick, it's like, okay, out you go. Boom,
You can use it when you need it.
It's done with compassion, without judgment, without criticism, and without identifying. Just okay, off we go. We can do this. Yeah, so funny.
Yeah. Well, that I do. One, I think all the traditions talk about this, but that personality patterns, I think serve the tightness and create a shield. And I too had to really have done years of body work to soften so that I could actually be touched and relax into it and appreciate it and feel that kind of gentle connection. And but prior to that, it was like, pressing against a stone.
Yep.
And then if people touched me, it was like, ooh, but yeah, that's been a big deal. And yeah, and I like that moving slow. So, if you're thinking about, beloved type threes and sort of, you mentioned a lot of things that have really served you. Anything that you would add as, you know, things that they might want to be aware of so that they don't get discouraged too quick? Because, type three likes to get to the mountaintop right away, right? I see the pattern, whoa, and I'll say, okay, the first thing is, how can you slow down?
Yeah.
Slow down. I should have done this 10 years ago. Let's go.
Oh, I hear that from so many types.
Yeah.
3 8s. It's like, why am I not there now? And and that is painful. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah.
That assertion. So your question again is, what can I illuminate for point 3 around tolerating the process?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not getting discouraged with sometimes slowness.
Yes. Yes.
Anything that
Yeah. So one of the first things is to really, really recognize and feel. I work with threes with this all the time, and they start laughing because they feel it instantly. The think do, the think do, the head centered dominance over the body. The body is the slave of the mind. It's how it's organized.
Yeah.
So to recognize that, and to recognize that in that process, the heart is not part of the decision-making system. And I'm not saying it's going to flip automatically, but to recognize that, to start, and that recognition slows things down. Because the minute there's a recognition, then the heart puts a little forward, a little bit in the game. And that is where the courage, the humility, where what is required can keep moving, a soul moving into its own revelation, feeling freedom. One of the breathtaking, beautiful things about the Enneagram, which I'm learning, is that it is a path unto itself of penetrating and seeing through, and it shows you the way. It lights the path. And all of us have to be courageous enough, regardless of our point, to notice, tolerate, and do the next thing.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say for 3. So see this pattern of think, do. And again, the minute you see it, bring the heart, and then everything automatically slows down.
Yeah. Well, it's and I think this is true for all the types, but the threes I've worked with, one of the shocks, and you've spoken to this quite beautifully, is that for some threes, in the midst of it, the machine is still producing all sorts of results, and I'm getting all these applauses, but all of a sudden I'm beginning to feel this intense emptiness.
Yes.
And in the face of everybody's, I have entranced the world with my 3 capacities, and they love me for that. But now I feel like a dead soul walking when I go onto the stage, and I can still perform the show, but now I feel, oh my God, this emptiness, this meaninglessness, and make it go away. Am I on the right track? And then the challenge is how can you learn to be with that and bring compassion to it? So I wonder if you could, just speak to that.
Yeah, that is I certainly am so deeply familiar with that from my history. Um, and that for threes out there, if you're watching, if you're listening, and for the three and all of us, if you are in touch with that emptiness, it's movement in the right direction. Trust the process. Be courageous, be patient, be compassionate. If you're feeling the truth of emptiness, because Michael, you and I both know what's really here is empty.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But not in the empty way that as a 0.3, you are organized around it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's something that's a doorway. It's a portal. It's an invitation. And our hearts, all of our hearts, all of our hearts, the four in all of us, we can tolerate our depths. We can tolerate our depths and our truths and all of the co-opted emptiness.
Yeah. And I think that's, maybe in grade school, they could have talked to us about emptiness. It would have been a great subject, right? It's like the emptiness is the doorway to spaciousness,
Yes.
right? And, but the other thing I noticed with threes, when they hit that point and they,
Panic.
they panic. They see the fraudulence, like, oh, I've been faking it. And then comes deep heartbreak, like their heart just, there's this grief that comes up and they go, is this how it's supposed to be? And I go, well, it's part of the journey. Your heart's opening up. There's probably a lot of things in there that you need to grieve. But does that resonate with you, that idea?
It does. It does. And I can remember again feeling the fear around the grief, this place wanting to backpedal,
Yeah.
And as with everything, it passes, there was, gosh, I can remember so early on in the diamond approach work, as we started to peel away the layers and reveal more and more of these constructs, it was, and the Enneagram illuminated it. So it illuminates it so perfectly. The grief is just huge.
Yeah.
But that starts to also become a guide in a particular way, because because now, granted, we're all organized around avoiding emptiness, shame, all of our feelings that we have called negative. And it's all portals. It's all portals. It's all the heart starting to,
open.
Come online.
Yeah. And I can remember when I was in the midst of this, I thought, am I going to just cry the rest of my life? I mean, come on, God, like, what is this? This porthole is a tough one. And then what's interesting, as is that it's also invites all the positive in too. To the extent I feel a deep grief, then it makes room for deep joy to come through, right? They're going down the same pipeline, and if I cut one off, I cut them both off. That analogy helped me to stick with it, because there was a sense, am I doing this wrong? How come no one else is crying as much as I am? And of course, if you're in a community where you're working on this, it's not alien, but fresh off the street and you're learning about your patterns, it's like, gosh, what do I do? And the thing I always suggest is that this work is done best within, not by yourself, but with others on it, because you need that holding. So what's been your experience around that? Does that ring true for you too?
Oh my gosh, it has so rang true for me. And you know, and again, when we were talking about these feelings and crying and being with our for a 3, if you're really honest, if you really are honest, it feels delicious, because it feels, there's something delicious about even grief,
Yeah.
all of it,
Yeah.
all of it.
Yeah.
But we're not organized around that. So I think it's fundamental. We are relational beings. Humans are relational beings. We need mirroring. We need support. We need all the 3-ish things that that 3 sort of manufacture. But as humans, we actually need those things for our own development. So to find whether it is individual support, you know, like the work, you're in a grief group, in a Diamond Heart group, whatever. But I don't stop there. I also have an individual teacher that I've been meeting with for 17 years. I have my inquiry partner that I've met with every week for some 17 years. You know, so it's like I use support.
Absolutely.
I'm also in ongoing courses and work with Russ continually.
Yeah.
And it just creates the vessel. It like creates the support, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's also deeply satisfying, I notice, to be in that kind of rapport with people. It's really food for my soul. So anytime I'm in the presence of that, it's just really such a gift. So I wonder if you could say a little bit about, you know, directions, for instance, going to 9 and to 3. Do you have time to say? Okay. You let me know if we're starting to impinge on your schedule. So.
Yep. Yeah. So, and I've got nothing after this but lunch. So, so directions of integration into what they're called, you know, stress point. So what I noticed historically in sort of the more fixed organization of point 3, and it's just sort of what happens, I think. So there's this think, do, 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 think, do. I can't do it again.
Yeah.
And we shunt. And, you know, and in that shunting, it would be, for me anyway, it would be days of recuperation. It'd be like deep recuperation. I can see now how historically my body used illness sometimes because I was not going down without a fight, you know? So I would get sick, and then the sickness would require my self-care, and then I would go down. And sometimes I would just go down. When I say go down, meaning shunting to 9, you know? So now Elvis has left the building. Cannot get to me. I cannot do it. No. No. Yeah. And then 6 is really interesting. So there is this constant undercurrent for point 3. There's this constant undercurrent of anxiety because it's part of this avoidant mechanism, you know? Keep going out. It's almost 7-ish in a way, you know, it's just, you know,
keep moving, almost like keep moving.
Yeah. I remember in a art therapy group that I did many years ago, I did this cartoon of myself and guns shooting at my feet, you know? So there's this continuous sort of anxiety, but also there's big defense around it. But so that would get expressed for point 3 for me only in the safest places. You know, I would be, you know, just my intimate people would know that I was suffering, struggling, anxious. But the minute that somebody came into the field that wasn't that safe little pod,
showtime,
you know? And so then you dance until back to 9. So,
Yeah.
one of the things I really learned on the continuum, and this is really valuable, I think, for point 3, is to really feel this inner anxiety, the inner anxiety that creates this performance requirement.
Yeah.
And that as that starts to be known, it softens the whole construct, it softens everything. So that, so now I never do the shut off. Every day there's time and quiet and reading and meditation and sitting.
Yeah.
9 is just here. I don't have to go there. And 6 is here in the form of courage all the time. And you still sometimes, I'll still sometimes feel that anxiety about something. And then there's this deep, okay, holding that arises. Okay. You know,
Yeah.
it's like the 3, 6, and 9 come together in the way they should be organized: belly, heart, head, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's, I really appreciate that, your articulation around the anxiety is kind of like that sense, you know, I got to get going. Where's the goal? I mean, I've talked to threes who said, if I don't have a goal, I start to get really restless. It's like, you know, and so I have lined
The
up
rest,
many.
the restlessness, the
Yes,
restlessness.
yes, and then there's like, I haven't been taught how to just go, oh, there's the restlessness. Oh, I can actually be with that and allow it and not, you know, escape it. And that begins to, as you say, transform the pattern.
Yeah.
But you know, when that restlessness anxiety comes up, it's like a blaring horn going, make a move, make a move. It's time. Something's trailing you. So that's interesting, that pause, and I have never heard it expressed that way. I really appreciate it, that kind of underlying anxiety. And so along with that, we often talk about, you know, the higher manifestation of 6, which is sometimes articulated as a type 3. I start to become oriented towards community and service and the other. And the beautiful thing 3s do is inspiring others to shine and to become real and to embrace their gifts. And so I wonder if what you've noticed about that, because sometimes 3s can be so caught up in their pattern until they change about, I got to get my success, I got to get it. And then as they go through their healing of their heart and, you know, bringing the centers, there's this other thing over here. And I wonder if that's been true for you, if you've noticed that kind of navigational pull.
So the answer is yes. And what's really interesting about it, and I think it's like the 3 in each of us, because as you know, all points are in everyone, but as organized around point 3, I think that there's this, I'll explain it this way. There was the recognition of all these patterns that I was identified with. And as there's been work to digest all this, chew it, swallow it, and digest it, which clears here, it's just like a turning. It's just a turning. It's just natural. It's just what happens.
Yeah.
And turning goes from being inner directed, like the 3 goes to 4, goes to 2. But at the highest level, it's like the whole heart movement, the whole movement. And so the organization around being part of something, I think of it, I've been using this word lately because I've talked to Russ a lot about it. It's legacy. What matters? What matters? And so for me, I've doing this conversation with you
Mm.
matters
Mm.
because
Yeah.
I know what it feels like.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know what it feels like.
Mm. Yes.
So, and working for a bigger organization as I do with Russ, helping
Mm.
him bring this very important work into the world as
Mm.
you do,
Mm.
that matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, is that the high point of 6? I guess that as you say that,
Mm.
yes, but it's just the natural turning that I
Yeah.
experience.
Well, I appreciate that because there is sort of a, well, there's, you know, so many voices coming in around the Enneagram out in the world. And one of the orientations is this idea that, okay, if you're 3, start working on your 6 issues. Or, you know, so instead of that natural turning and maturing and just the gravitational, graceful pull, there's like, okay, and you know, this is the way Russ taught it to me and others was, you don't like, your personality is the one that starts to go to 6, right? Like we're going there now, and then I'm going to go to the, I'm going to go to the missing piece of the 9, and as opposed to that you know, the maturation of awareness has us, you know, moving. So, yeah, so I appreciate that, and that you know, feels more in line with what my experience has been. So what about have you sort of, and you've already kind of identified, but that, you know, part of the soul's journey is like the missing piece of the 9, where you can actually relax and be still and be here without agenda, and maybe it's preceded by crashing and burning for 5 to 10 days, and then all of a sudden, you know, as you get healthier and more present, you go, oh, I'll just bring the 9 in every day. I mean, why wait until I'm, you know, on the doorsteps of death? So, but
And you don't even think that, it's just what happens.
Yeah. Well, beautiful. Yeah. So I'm just so appreciating this conversation with you, and wonder if you'd say a little bit about what inspires joy and love in your life.
Oh. Love just is, you know? You know? And that brings joy. Interestingly enough. You know, it's interesting because the recognition and the truth of it is just so profound. It's not a thing. It's not just a person. It's not just an experience. It's being here. It's not missing it. And it's having a heart that's engaged in each moment is the answer.
Well, and any sort of last words of hope for the beloved 3 on this journey? You said a lot of awesome things, and
yeah. So what I would say, if for a 3 watching this program, or the 3 in all of us, is that if you're looking and listening, there's a place that's willing. There's a place that's willing, and we're stronger and more capable and more courageous than we know. And that there's nothing more worth it. There's no thing, there's no career, there's nothing more worth it.
Beautiful. Well, I appreciate getting to be with your heart. Thank you. So, well, why don't we stop here? And I just want to express my gratitude for your beautiful teaching and your presence. And if people wanted to get in touch with you, would that be okay? Or do you want, we can talk about what would be, you know, you might get flooded.
Okay.
All the threes around the world go, we got to talk to that woman. Yeah, but thank you. And so I will turn the recording off and let's see here.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, much love.